Above a Chinese river sits the tallest stone Buddha ever carved. Over 70 meters tall, 1,300
antiquity.
The giant Buddha of Lashan, carved where carving anything seemed impossible. By one extraordinary man who triumphed over evil, endured a horrible fate, and suffered an untimely death, all to give China a sacred treasure like none other. Killer earthquakes rocked it, and still it survived. But now, Lashan's giant Buddha is fighting for its life against the modern world. A team of Chinese scientists is racing to unlock the secrets of this ancient man-made marvel, hoping they can save it. Some 1,600 kilometers from China's capital, Beijing, in the heart of Sichuan province, there's a place where three rivers converge on their way to join the mighty Yangtze. Millions come here from all over China and across the world. They come to see a man-made marvel, the tallest stone Buddha ever carved, Lashan's giant Buddha. A sight no one ever forgets.
It is so much bigger than I ever imagined.
There's nothing like it in the world.
I feel blessed I came to see it.
But for the thousands who worship here, Lashan's giant Buddha is more than just a tourist attraction. Like Professor Charles Hyam, it's an encounter with greatness.
It is, beyond any doubt, one of the great monuments of the ancient world.
For more than 1,000 years, a community of monks has devoted itself to the Lashan giant Buddha. Monks have a saying: the Buddha is a mountain, and the mountain is a Buddha. A saying that's literally true.
The most extraordinary feature of this remarkable monument is the way in which the Buddha is not only so colossal, but it's cut right back from the cliff face. And so this gives you some idea of the enormous amount of rock that would have had to be taken away in order ultimately to create what we see.
A 100-meter-high sandstone cliff. Its middle finger alone is taller than a 3-story building. Each massive foot can accommodate more than 100 people. It's 4 times the size of Mount Rushmore's heads, and twice as high as Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro. It even dwarfs the Statue of Liberty. Carving this giant began in 713 AD. Thanks to unwavering faith and hard work.
It's hard to imagine how people in the past could have built this 71-meter Buddha without any modern engineering techniques.
No ancient Buddha carved of stone can rival its 71 meters. But being number one's an honor tinged with sadness. For centuries, the Lashan Buddha shared the spotlight with two other world-famous giants, Afghanistan's Bamyan Buddhas. Until the Taliban blew them to bits in 2001. The loss of the Bamyan Buddhas makes preserving the Lashan Buddha even more important, because this giant's also under threat. Not from dynamite, but from equally lethal forces. Corrosive rain and wind, are slowly turning this massive sculpture into rubble. While river currents relentlessly attack its foundations. But a dedicated team of conservation experts won't let this Buddha go down. They're fighting back on land. Mixing modern technology with ancient engineering, even risking their own lives to save this ancient wonder from an enemy it was never built to face: the modern world.
There is still so much we do not understand about the Leshan giant Buddha. So many secrets to uncover.
But day after day, they carry on the fight. Inspired by the example of one incredible man who lived over 1,000 years ago. A simple monk whose love and courage gave this giant gift to China and the world. A vow that drove him to commit an act of unspeakable horror, and ultimately cost him his life. In southwest China, a group of scientists is racing to into the river and is lost forever. Science holds the key to the giant Buddha's future. But the Lashan monks are the guardians of its past. In a special chapel, they honor the man who brought this miracle of stone into the world. 1,300 rich harvest for fishermen and a liquid highway for merchants. But where those rivers meet, strong currents collide, creating a death trap.
Where the three rivers met, the currents were very fast. Many boats sank, and many people died. The locals believed a river monster was responsible.
One Buddhist monk vows to tame the monster's angry spirit. His name is Haitong, and he has seen too many people drown. Haitong prays as he has never prayed before, seeking an answer to the impossible challenge of calming a raging river. In his mind, only the most powerful force in the universe can defeat such a powerful demon. The force of the Buddha himself.
The Buddha exercised a luminous power over natural forces, and one of those natural forces is the power of water. The Buddha could bring rain, the Buddha could ward off enemies, and the Buddha could save boatmen.
But saving the boatmen means doing the impossible. Haitang must recruit skilled stone carvers, find the money to pay them, and ask them to rip simple hand tools. Carving the Buddha's holy image into Lashan's sheer cliffs to calm its clashing currents. A challenge this man understands. His name is He Yinglin, and he's one of China's leading stone carvers. He's carved over 3,000 Buddhas. At Oriental Buddhist Theme Park, only carving replicas of some of the world's most famous Buddhist statues.
I believe that Haitong investigated many places before he decided where to carve the giant Buddha.
By astonishing good fortune, if you could pick one spot anywhere in the world to hand-carve a Buddha, that place would be Lashan.
The entire mountain is composed of red sandstone, which is rare in the world. Red sandstone is very easy to carve. It requires very little strength.
Why did Haitang make his task so much harder? By carving a gigantic 70-meter Buddha. As it turns out, Lashan's sandstone cliffs are not only easy to carve, they make carving big the best way to go.
The mountain was ideal for making a giant sculpture, but it was not suitable for a smaller one.
That's because Lashan's sandstone is wet, saturated with rain from Sichuan's dam. Because carving exposes more surface area to sun and wind. A smaller carved statue dries out faster than a big one, because more of its body mass is exposed surface area. And the faster a carving dries out, the faster it crumbles into dust.
Once the water is gone, then the sculpture is dead. It will begin to weather and the surface will peel off.
Carvings outlive small carvings, unless they're sheltered from the elements, something people here have recognized for hundreds of years. Only meters from the giant Buddha, there's an ancient subterranean world where networks of catacombs lace their way through the surrounding mountains. Around 200 BC, these tombs are evidence of a carving tradition that was already ancient in Haitang's day. They're also memorials to the time when an exotic Indian religion first arrived in China. Buddhism.
The earliest evidence of Buddha's images in China was found in Sichuan during the Han Dynasty. Images of Buddha inside tombs, local tombs.
But Sichuan's most magnificent Buddhist memorial soars far above the ground. This is Omei Shan, a 4,000-meter mountain, less than 20 kilometers from Lashan, home to China's first Buddhist temple. and one of China's holiest Buddhist sites. 1,300 years ago, Mount Olmei would have been Haitang's spiritual beacon. Haitang's giant Buddha was on sacred ground. The sandstone mountain was perfect for carving, and Haitang had master carvers working for him. But all this still doesn't explain how one simple monk managed to carve the world's tallest. Surrounded on three sides by thick vegetation, with a raging river at its base. The story of how he succeeded is astonishing, inspirational, and tragic. In China's Sichuan province, a giant stone Buddha stands guard over a treacherous river junction. A spiritual magnet drawing thousands of worshippers. Even a routine cleaning of the world's tallest stone Buddha means putting lives on the line. 71 meters in the air. This is not a job for the faint of heart.
老板，你们注意到安全哦！刚才我交代的保险绳。
It's also as close. This giant Buddha. Records show that Haitang and his stonemasons carved from the top down, slowly transforming solid rock into a 33,000 cubic meter work of art. If anybody knows what that's like, it's He Yinglin. In 1991, He and his team carved a 173-meter sleeping Buddha into the side of a cliff. So tough, 3 of his carvers were injured working on the sheer cliff.
When I was carving the sleeping Buddha, I realized how hard Haitang's job must have been.
不容易。
When He carves a giant Buddha, he starts with a model.
主要是就是做雕塑工作室，做雕塑稿。
In the workshop, we make our clay models.
我们现在做的这个就是那个。
This is a clay model.
做梨树，这个梨树是什么用？
We will amplify it according to how big we want.
The model acts as a 3D reference. It's divided into grids. Then, using modern survey equipment and lasers, it's plotted onto the cliff face the sculptors will carve. He can amplify a model like this up to 100 times on a sheer cliff face, with millimeter accuracy.
做雕塑。
This is the main difference between us and people in the past. In the past, people did not have the technology to amplify a small model.
Without using a model.
哎，那边往上一点。
Haitang could have directed his masons by traveling back and forth across the river,
听到没有？
observing from the far side, then returning to tell the carvers where to work, over and over again. An exhausting feat, possible only for a man of supreme dedication, and a man who has the conservation team must now resurrect. Conservator Peng Shiri and archaeologist Yuan Jinchuan are trying to reconstruct what the Buddha originally looked like. Not an easy task, because the Buddha millions see today doesn't look the same as the Buddha Haitang carved 1,300 years ago. More than 1,000 years of And the Buddha's undergone multiple facelifts over the centuries.
这个站到了，因为后来这个大概是应该是60、70年代修的时候，把眼睛都搞了闭起来。
对，后面有一站，
好像围闭了，后来完了睁开了。
很像这个，就是它这个。
Hard as it is, the team must find the answer. In 1996, the Lashan Giant Buddha became a World Heritage Site. Since then, any restoration work but even the oldest photo is only 130 years old. So the team looks further back in time, and some 30 kilometers downstream from Lashan. At a place called Jiajiang, Yuan Jinchuan believes he's found the smoking gun. Jiajiang's sandstone cliffs are covered with Buddha of Lashan. Yuan Jinchuan believes that if Haitang had a model for his Buddha, he could have found it here.
When I first came here, I started from the highest point and studied the Buddhas one by one. When I reached this one, it immediately reminded me of the giant Buddha.
Why? Because its hair, its face, and like the Lashan Buddha, it gazes serenely over a river.
Haitong would have passed by the small Jiajiang Buddha on his way to Leshan. It could have impressed him so much that he chose it as the model for the giant Buddha.
If as he commanded his army of artisans. And they slowly turned a sandstone cliff into a spiritual masterpiece, while Haitong labored at the equally Herculean effort of paying for it.
It was a very difficult project. Haitong spent 10 years trying to raise enough money to build the Buddha.
History was on Haitong's side. In 700 AD, China's Tang dynasty was in power, and Buddhism had never been more popular.
It was the great golden age of Buddhism, and to be an influential monk was to be a very important person within society, and Haitong was no exception. And here, obviously, he was able to
amassed an enormous amount of money to build his giant Buddha, but his triumph would lead to tragedy. In Lashan, a greedy official hears of Haitong's fundraising success and decides he's entitled to a cut. When Haitong refuses to yield to bullying, the Buddha's money.
The sacrifice convinced the greedy official that Haitong's belief was strong. He gave up his idea of asking for money.
Haitong's grisly act saves his Buddha, but at a terrible price. As the funeral pyre consumes his remains, his vision of a giant Buddha goes up in smoke. Carving comes to a halt, and all seems lost. Until China's most powerful man comes to the rescue.
One of the obsessions over centuries, elements of Buddhism that was so attractive to the rulers of China over the centuries was the fact that Buddhism gave you this option, this possibility of rebirth in eternity.
With eternity on his mind, the emperor opens his purse. The carvers go back to work and keep working until the Lashan Buddha is finished. 13 years later, eternity is also on the minds of Peng Shiri and the restoration team. But it's not their immortality they're worried about. It's the Buddha's. The giant sculpture's been attacked on multiple fronts. By a deadly threat, it was never built. A sacred pilgrimage site in China's Sichuan province is home to the world's tallest stone Buddha. A Buddha that survived for 1,300 years. But now, there's fear that a recent catastrophe may have shortened its life. A magnitude 7.9 earthquake strikes Sichuan, killing over 70,000 people, rocking Lashan with powerful seismic waves.
When the earthquake struck, I felt like I was standing on water. Everything was moving. I thought the ground was going to collapse under me. The temple was swaying.
To find out if the massive quake has damaged the Buddha, a team of scientists must attempt something never tried before.
就是我们这个线啊，就是走线的时候，这个雷达，这个因为我们是200个，就绕个十字，打个十字，然后呢绕个圈圈。
Scan the entire statue with ground-penetrating radar. A built-in transmitting antenna sends records the reflection of those waves. Any change in the rock formation shows up as variations in the return signal, giving the team a picture of the rock's internal structure, giving them the crucial data they'll need to keep this Buddha in one piece. Scanned a 71-meter-tall stone statue.
We combine the past and the present techniques to solve the problem. We use the main rope to fix the horizontal position of the antenna. Then we use handheld ropes to change the vertical position of the antenna.
To get it right, they must literally scan the Buddha from head to toe. With the most dangerous part over, the team faces its next challenge: analyzing data no one's ever seen before. Geologist Chang Ningshong is responsible for deciphering the indecipherable.
We studied a lot of articles about the characteristics of weathered rock. We also collected a lot of information about cracks and other problems in tunnels. And
hard work turns the raw data into a valuable resource that's revolutionized the science of sandstone restoration. It also reveals if the May 12th earthquake damaged the Buddha. The pictures don't look good.
we found a crack in the lower right leg.
anxiety grows. But after further analysis, Jiang Ningsheng and Peng Shiri come to the conclusion that the cracks are ancient and that the Sichuan earthquake hasn't damaged the Buddha. But that doesn't mean the Buddha's out of danger. The scans also revealed a very real threat: weathering, the constant erosion of the rock by the environment. In the scan, weathered layers show up as lower density, and there's plenty on view. Ironically, the same geological conditions that sandstone isn't solid rock. It's sand particles held together by a natural mortar made up of iron, potassium, sodium, and aluminum. The mortar acts like a living membrane, sucking in moisture from the environment when it's wet and exhaling it back out when it's dry. Over time, this sandstone is weaker than most. That's because the Buddha faces west, into the afternoon sun. Afternoon sun warms the sandstone, and it breathes out, releasing moisture. In the cooler evening, it breathes that moisture back in as it contracts. A never-ending cycle of wet and dry.
这就风化以后，它就是这个效果。
Look at this. It's the effect of weathering. The stone is coarse, and you can break it with your hands.
你看那个。
But there's an even more destructive force than the heat of the sun. Believe it or not, it's this. In Leshan's wet climate, plants thrive in the weathered rock. Their roots release acids that dissolve the sand.
The monument would be absolutely covered in vegetation, chiseling away at the sandstone.
There's only one way to combat this alarming threat. Some of the world's most extreme weeding. How has the Leshan Buddha survived all these natural enemies for 1,300 years? These holes on and around the Buddha hold the clue. As it turns out, Haitong understood the weakness of his building material and planned for its survival.
Giant statue house covering the body of the Buddha.
有一座石山的 logo.
Peng Shuri and his team have confirmed that the holes in the Buddha's chest are the foundation points for this massive building. As wide as the Buddha and 13 stories high, this epic structure shielded the Buddha from the drying effects of the sun. And without sunlight, no plants could grow. Haitong's genius doesn't stop there. The Buddha could also suffer aqueducts that channeled excess water from the Buddha to the river. Experts believe these drains would also work in reverse. In ancient times, monks could have plugged the drains during dry spells to lock water in. Together, the drains in the giant statue house would have slowed down the weathering process. But all of Haitong's careful planning couldn't protect against one thing: history. About 700 years ago, Mongol invaders put the Buddha's protective armor to the torch, exposing the statue to its natural enemies of wind, sun, weeds, and rain. Now, for the first time, the radar scan has revealed how much damage the Buddha suffered in the last 700 years. Unfortunately, the news isn't good.
There is a rather serious weather layer.
Damage is serious, and it's bound to get even worse. Unless the team can somehow fight back against the biggest threat of all, China's industrial might. A team of experts is racing to save the world's tallest stone Buddha. But today's mission is undersea warfare. A sonar scan, searching for dangers that lurk below. Powerful river currents are eating away at the Buddha's foundations and undermining the viewing platform at its feet. In 2002, engineers discovered more than 10 cracks in the viewing platform. Square meters bigger. A concrete barrier against corrosive currents. But today, it's the Sichuan earthquake that has everybody worried. Upstream, the quake triggered landslides that made river water into lakes. If these lakes suddenly collapse, a huge volume of water will charge down the river, engulfing everything in its path. To face it. The sonar results are in, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. There's no sign of damage from the earthquake, and the platform is holding up well against the force of the river. For now, the team can stop worrying about underwater danger. But there's plenty more danger to worry about. The biggest threat isn't under the river. It's across it. Lushan. Like most of China, Lushan's population and industrial base are growing explosively, generating pollution that's conspiring with nature to attack the Buddha with chemical weapons it was never built to survive.
这个地方的年降雨量呢，大概是1300多个毫米。那么在这种降雨中
The annual rainfall is as many large factories in the area produces acid rain, which is accelerating the erosion on the surface of the Buddha.
酸雨的加入了，就使得大佛表面的侵蚀呢将会增强。
Acid rain and car exhaust both contain sulfites, one of sandstone's deadliest enemies. When sandstone sucks in pollution, the sulfites react with chemical penetrate deeper into the rock, creating more crystals that open up more cracks that let in more pollution until the sandstone falls apart. To prevent that, Lushan's closing nearby factories, creating a pollution-free zone around the Buddha. But pollution isn't the only consequence of China's rocketing rise to riches. With more on a quiet day, 3,000 people visit the Buddha. During a religious festival, that number skyrockets to 45,000. The most destructive threat from these thousands of visitors turns out to be the same thing that keeps them from slipping. Modern no-slip soles create friction between walking feet and sandstone, eroding the surface with every step. To help preserve the Buddha's surface, the teams commissioned a high-tech portrait. Using a laser scanner to record an accurate
most advanced measuring equipment, not just here in China, but in the world.
The high-definition scanner fires a laser beam at a phenomenal 500,000 times per second, measuring millions and millions of points all over the Buddha's surface, creating a virtual 3D copy of the Buddha that's accurate to the millimeter. Chisel mark. Details impossible to see with the human eye. The 3D laser portrait gives Peng Shiri the data he needs to assess the threat. By comparing this scan with future scans, he can calculate how fast the Buddha is eroding.
I believe we now have the knowledge needed to look many generations to come.
The scans also solved a mystery from the past. Ancient texts say that when the Buddha was new, it was painted with brilliant colors and covered with gold. Small holes on the Buddha's chest and arms hint this story may be true.
We speculate that these holes help attach coverings such as gold or paint.
But completes the picture. Haitong's Buddha was covered in plaster, a foundation for paint and gold. An engineering masterpiece and a testament to the power of faith.
The Leshan Buddha embodies the pinnacle of Buddhism in China.
Haitong never lived to know it, but his Buddha also achieved his ultimate.
After the Buddha was built, a lot of rock from the mountain was dumped into the river, which lowered the depths of the river, slowed down the water, and reduced the number of boat accidents. The original purpose of building the Buddha was therefore achieved by chance. Even now, we still think people was amazing thing. Incredible sculpture 1,300 years ago.
After 1,300 years, the Leshan Buddha's serene gaze and awesome dimensions still welcome and astonish all those who come to wonder, to ponder, and to pray, offering insight and hope to so many as they navigate the treacherous waters of this world. Healing mysteries, battling remorseless threats, ensuring that this sacred man-made marvel survives for another millennium and beyond.
Up next, find out what it takes to fit $1 million missile launching unit into $1 billion warship on Extreme Engineering. Next.